Good morning, Tiffany and Bethy. Today is going to be a book review slash book challenge slash ideas on downsizing. First off, let's talk about this book that Tiffany let me borrow. This is by the author Augusten Burroughs, and she used to talk about him like all the time, especially I think it was in high school. I heard her talk about him a lot, and I was, at the time I couldn't care less. But now that I've read this book, which I kind of saw at work and I was bored one day, so I was like randomly reading lines in it, and I was like, I really love the way he writes, I just like I like his wording. So I really wanted to read this, and I'm really glad I did. This looks like a self-help book, and while you're reading it, it doesn't feel like a self-help book, but in the end it's inevitably a self-help book. There are certain chapters in here that like resonated with me more than others. It made me rethink a lot of things and want to change the way I go about getting a job, or looking at myself in the mirror, or seeing other people, or losing people, I like that he's very straightforward. He's kind of he doesn't beat around the bush. He doesn't fluff it up with happy little pats on the back saying it's going to be okay. He's like, no, you're not. And that's fine. You're allowed to fall apart and all this stuff. And I really liked that approach, because I was like, thank you for not making me feel like a shitty person after reading this. Tiffany, thank you for this. I will give this back to you the next time I see you. So recently I've been kind of obsessed with tiny houses and minimalist living. I had more stuff than I really needed, and I still do that. And it particularly happens all the time with books. If it's a thrift store and they're really cheap, or at a yard sale, or if a business is closing, like out at the mall, I felt obligated to buy books even though another bookstore was coming in its place. I tend to have a lot of books that I just don't read, and I end up collecting. I think one of the key things to remembering when you're cleaning things out, especially if you have like an overload of stuff and you want to minimize it, the key thing that I found helps me is that I did this with clothes too. Do you really need it? And then if you say, I guess not, ask yourself, do I really want it? Am I going to wear it, or am I going to read it right away? Or within the next year maybe? Or you can even say, like, if I get rid of it, is there another way for me to borrow it in the future in case I wanted to read it? And that, using that little process of elimination usually helps me. That's terrible. However, I do have a big stack of books that I don't really plan on giving away. Half of them I feel like I might get rid of them, and the other half I know I want to keep, but I haven't read them yet. So this is my 2015 challenge. F. Scott Fitzgerald's Tender is the Night. I don't know why, but I was obsessed with trying to read this book. I will say that The Great Gatsby is like one of the easiest ones to read, and probably his most enjoyable works thus far. But most of his stories are pretty much like, ooh, look how rich and privileged we are, and nothing in our life matters. Wait, I have to make a stack. Ralph Heffler, Modoc. This, I read a few, I think I read a chapter in this, and it's really sweet. It's a true story about an elephant and his best friend. Mermaids by Sky Alexander. The reason I bought this book, other than the fact that it's about mermaids, is this is like the most beautiful book I've ever seen. Just look at the insides. Just like everything's so beautifully decorated, and I was like, this is the ultimate book. So it's just like myth, legends, and lore. So you get so alone at times that it just makes sense. Charles Bukowski. Regret to say I haven't read any of his novels yet. I would really like to, but I'm a fan of his poetry, some of his poetry at least, because he's like very straightforward, straight up smoking booze and women type of guy. But you know, this poetry's fun. He's like the voice of Los Angeles. Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I've read some of this. And if I told anybody that I read the whole thing, I apologize because I'm a big fat liar. But, you know, how have I gone my life without reading Peter fucking Pan? Leave Her to Heaven by Ben Ames Williams. This is actually an old book from my grandpa's collection. Ooh, no, my great-grandpa's collection. I've seen the movie. It's like a 40s, set in the 40s, from the 40s. I may regret this decision, but I couldn't give it away without at least trying it. Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind. Look how big this friggin' book is. Oh my god. Oh. Marion Zimmer Bradley, The Mists of Avalon. This one is also an enormous book, and I remember I found this at a yard sale a long time ago when the movie, the 2 or 3 part movie came out on TV, and I loved the movie. It's got King Arthur, it's got old world magic, and the whole story's told from a female point of view. I love it. The Raw Cure by Jessie Jacoby. This is pretty self-explanatory. You know, how I'm like, ooh, raw food, raw food. Well, yeah, I haven't been very good with the whole raw food lately. Mostly because we're poor and it's cold. Dawn French, Dear Fatty. I went through a phase where I was like absolutely in love with Dawn French, and I still am, but I know absolutely nothing about her. And the last one is Violin by Anne Rice. I remember trying to read this, oh my god, when I was in middle school. I read a few chapters and then I got distracted as usual. Now that I'm older, I might appreciate it a little more than when I did when I was in high school, when the only reason I wanted to read it was because I was into vampires. Now that this is out of the way, I can get on to attempting this. I'm not a bookworm. I'd like to be, but I can't push a cart sideways.